2 weeks after burying the woman who raised her, Evelyn Hart received a thick ivory envelope that did not feel like closure but a summons. Not from court, not yet, but from her past. The letter had read Charleston law offices, but the message came straight from the grave, an invitation to the reading of her mother's will. No call, no email, no forewarning, just her name handwritten in perfect cursive like a place card at a dinner party she was never meant to attend. She sat in her Portland apartment holding the envelope like it was ticking. Her hands trembled, but not from grief. It was something older, deeper, a cold tension that had settled into her bones years ago, nurtured by silence. By the way, her older sister Vivian Hart had turned their mother's death into a stage production without offering her even a supporting role. Evelyn had flown in from the West Coast 5 minutes late, and Vivian made sure everyone knew. Her sister's hug at the funeral was for the audience. The real message was delivered in a whisper when Evelyn approached the casket. "Do not ruin the atmosphere." That sentence had not left her since. It wrapped around her spine like a steel cord. She had not touched their mother's hand, had not spoken a word before they closed the casket. Vivian had kept her away, and everyone let her now. The will. She packed her things in silence. The silk handkerchief their mother gave her before college was still folded in the nightstand. M.H.M. Margaret Hart. The initials felt like a wound that had never properly healed. She tucked the handkerchief into her coat pocket, locked the door behind her, and boarded the red-eye flight to Charleston. The estate was just as she remembered, immaculate, distant, performative. Magnolia trees lined the driveway like guards to a kingdom she was no longer a part of. She parked by the gardener's shed, not the front like Vivian and her husband always did. Mrs. Caldwell, the longtime housekeeper, opened the door and looked stunned. "You really came back inside." The house still smelled of lavender and lemon oil, but the warmth was gone. Vivian arrived shortly after, clad in a cream silk dress with a wine glass in hand and that trademark smile, polished, cold, theatrical. "Oh, Evelyn, I did not think you would make it." Her words dripped with feigned politeness. Evelyn did not respond. She did not need to. The eyes of distant relatives in the parlor all flicked toward her then away again like she was something shameful. Only Uncle Leonard gave a solemn nod from across the room. The reading took place outside under trellises dressed in pale blue linens. Of course it did. Vivian had turned it into a garden party. When attorney Richard Evans arrived, briefcase in hand, Vivian nearly rushed to greet him. But Evelyn saw something subtle. Vivian slipped a small envelope beneath the table to their Uncle Frederick. The motion was clean, rehearsed. When Richard called for the primary beneficiary to confirm identity, Evelyn signed the form without flinching. Vivian sipped water slowly, eyes like daggers. "Surprises should be managed," she said sweetly. "Shouldn't they, Eve?" But the surprise was not Vivian's to manage. Richard read the will. Everything, estate, assets, property, income, went to Evelyn. The silence that followed was deafening. Wine glass shattered near the mimosa tray. Vivian bolted upright. "That is not possible." Her voice cracked. She was not in her right mind. Richard did not even look up. He confirmed notarization, witnesses, legal soundness. Evelyn said nothing, though her fingers dug into the linen napkin in her lap. Then came the letter, a handwritten message from their mother to Evelyn. She read it aloud, her voice barely louder than the wind. Margaret had known. She had seen the hospital bill Evelyn paid in secret. She had known Vivian tried to sell the estate while she was sick. The will was not changed out of spite, but out of recognition because Evelyn listened when no one else did. Vivian screamed, "It is all lies, manipulation. You poisoned her mind." Evelyn lifted the letter for all to see. This was her voice, not mine. "This is the truth." The guests murmured. No one defended Vivian, not even her husband. The silence that followed was suffocating. Vivian stood in the middle of the garden like a statue cracked at the base, trembling but refusing to fall. Her fists clenched at her sides, nails digging crescents into her palms. She opened her mouth as if to deliver another protest, but nothing came. Uncle Frederick, the one she had tried to bribe just moments ago, stared at the grass beneath his shoes, his lips pressed into a thin, regretful line. Her husband, Charles Bennett, avoided her gaze entirely, studying the pattern of the tablecloth like it held the answers. It was over, and yet it was not. Evelyn remained seated, the letter from her mother still in her lap, her heart beating against the walls of her chest like it wanted to scream and weep all at once. But she kept her face steady. This was not triumph. It was not victory. It was something much more fragile. Vindication, yes, but tangled with sadness. She had not wanted to be the only one left standing. She had only wanted to be seen. Vivian turned sharply on her heel and stormed off the patio. No one followed. Even the birds in the trees had gone quiet. 3 days later, the papers came. A manila envelope in Evelyn's mailbox stamped with the seal of the Charleston County Superior Court summons. Vivian had filed a formal suit. The accusation was brutal, emotional coercion, undue influence, fraud. Vivian's legal team claimed Margaret Hart had been mentally impaired during the revision of the will, and that Evelyn had manipulated her into changing it. Evelyn sat at her kitchen table in Portland, hands cold against the ceramic mug of untouched coffee. She had stayed up for nights by her mother's bedside, held her hand during the fevers, listened to her breathe when words were too much, and now those moments were being rewritten as a strategy, a scheme. But she was not unprepared. From the bottom drawer of her file cabinet, she retrieved a metal box. Inside was everything her mother had left her. Not jewelry, not heirlooms, but truth. Documents, doctor's notes, a video in her mother's handwriting on every envelope for Evelyn if needed. The video was the anchor. In it, Margaret Hart sat upright in bed, dressed in a cream sweater, hair brushed, voice calm and clear. I mended my will because I wanted Evelyn to have the house. Not because she asked, but because she did not. She listened. She cared. I was lucid. I was not coerced. And then that devastating truth. Vivian tried to sell the estate while I was hospitalized. She never asked me what I wanted. She told me what should be done. Evelyn sent it all to her attorney, Caroline Pierce, a woman with sharp eyes and no appetite for theatrics. After watching the footage, Caroline looked up and said one sentence. "We are not just defending. We are going on the offensive." The courthouse in Charleston was humming the morning of the hearing. Reporters lined the steps like vultures, anticipating the first scene of drama. Evelyn walked in with Caroline Pierce at her side. Calm on the outside, but inside every breath was a negotiation, not of fear, but of control, of pain, of what had been taken and what was now hers to reclaim. The courtroom itself was a theater Vivian had performed in before. School board campaigns, alumni events, donor galas. But today she did not get to write the script. She wore a plum suit, lips lined sharp, hair in a flawless twist. But Evelyn saw through it, the twitch in her jaw, the shallow breaths, the way her husband sat just slightly apart from her on the plaintiff's bench. It all betrayed the performance. Judge Harrison Cole presided. Mid-60s, former military, known for cutting through dramatic lack butter. His voice was gravel, his gavel unforgiving. "Miss Pierce," he said, "look into Vivian first. Your opening statement." Vivian's attorney rose, reciting legal jargon dressed in dramatic flair, fragile mental state, manipulative environment, unfair advantage. Evelyn did not flinch. She had already lived through the accusation in her sister's eyes 1,000 times. Caroline rose when called, her tone surgical. She spoke not with emotion, but with truth backed by timestamps, signatures, and medical affidavit. Then came the USB. "Your Honor," Caroline said, placing it gently on the table. "We would like to submit this video recorded under full legal consent 3 weeks before the decedent's passing. The content directly addresses the plaintiff's accusations." The judge nodded. "Play it." Every head turned to the screen. Evelyn's breath caught as her mother appeared. Smaller, older, but so unmistakably clear. Margaret's voice broke the air. "I am of sound mind. I am not being forced. I changed my will because I trust my youngest daughter, Evelyn. She did not ask. She simply stayed. Then after a pause, Vivian tried to sell this house without my permission. She even staged the interiors. I never gave my consent." Vivian visibly stiffened. Whispers rippled through the courtroom. Charles, her husband, looked down again, his jaw clenched. The video ended, silence thickened. Caroline stood again. "We also have affidavit from the attending physician, Dr. Clanton, confirming full cognitive awareness, and a letter from Nurse Caroline Caldwell verifying the conditions under which the video was taken." Judge Harrison Cole nodded slowly. "Thank you, counsel." Then he turned to Vivian. "Do you have any further evidence or rebuttal?" Vivian stood slowly, but the confidence she wore like a crown had cracked. "My mother was medicated. She did not know what she was saying. This is character assassination." The judge raised a hand. "Miss Hart, I reviewed the dosage and medication log submitted with your sister's evidence. There is no indication of impairment." Vivian looked around the room, eyes desperate. "You all think she was a saint," she hissed. "But you did not live with her. She was cold, manipulative, and Evelyn, she just swooped in when Mom was dying and played savior." Caroline did not rise. She did not need to. The judge leaned forward. "And yet your mother's own words contradict that." Vivian collapsed into her seat. Her hands trembled. And for the first time, she looked small, not defeated but revealed. The judge's gavel struck once, not to silence a room because it already was, but to signal the weight of truth landing hard. The court finds the will signed by Margaret Hart on February 10th to be valid, binding, and executed under full cognitive capacity. His voice was clear, devoid of sympathy or anger, just judgment laid bare. Evelyn exhaled for the first time in what felt like weeks. Not a sigh of relief, but release, the kind of breath that only comes when you finally put down a burden you carried through every room of your childhood. Caroline placed a firm hand on her arm. No smile, just silent acknowledgement of the battle they had just won. Vivian did not move. Her body was present, but the fire was gone. The courtroom no longer hers to command. Even Charles did not look her way. He rose without a word, stepping past her like she was part of the courtroom decor. Her eyes, rimmed red from the pressure she refused to show, followed him, pleading, confused, empty. Evelyn walked past her sister with calm steps, no hesitation. As she neared the exit, Vivian muttered under her breath loud enough for only her to hear. "You think you won, but you did not. You just wore a better mask." Evelyn paused. The words did not land like a dagger. Not anymore. She turned slowly and looked Vivian in the eyes, those same eyes that used to tower over her, command her, shame her into silence. "I did not wear a mask," she said. "I wore the truth. You just never learned how to see it." And then she left. Outside the courthouse, the midday sun blazed. Reporters hovered. Cameras ready. But Evelyn did not stop. She did not need applause. Her mother had already spoken for her, left her final testament not in wealth but in trust. Later that evening, she returned to the Charleston estate, now hers by name but still layered in ghosts. The handkerchief with her mother's initials rested on the mantel next to a framed photograph taken before the illness. Margaret in her garden, a soft smile on her lips, surrounded by lavender and wild jasmine. Evelyn did not uncork wine. She did not call friends. She did not update social media or celebrate. She simply sat in her mother's old armchair, legs folded beneath her, letter in hand. The real inheritance was not the estate or the money. It was the letter, the final choice her mother made in full clarity, without fear or favor. She was not the forgotten daughter anymore. She was the one remembered when it mattered most. Thank you for watching this story on Legacy Forsaken. If this story moved you, if you have ever fought to protect the truth no one else believed, then you know how much strength it takes to stand alone. Do not forget to like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to Legacy Forsaken for more stories where justice does not knock, it kicks the door.